Hey there, welcome to Takeaway with Sam Oches, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I am Sam Oches, editor-in-chief here at NRN, and this is the show where I give you an all-access pass to the restaurant industry's most influential decision-makers. This week, I'm talking with Nick Pihakis. He is the founder and CEO of Pihakis Restaurant Group, a Birmingham, Alabama-based portfolio with 6 distinct concepts. That includes Rodney Scott's Barbecue with the renowned pitmaster out of Charleston, South Carolina, and most recently it includes Joyland, a fast casual concept in partnership with James Beard award-winning chef Sean Brock. Nick has been in the hospitality industry since he was a teenager, and he was the co-founder of the barbecue concept Jim and Nick's. Now he's committed to building one of the South's most impressive restaurant groups by pairing his expertise at scaling restaurants with concepts that feature chef-designed menus. He joined the podcast to talk about how restaurants that are laser-focused on high-quality foods can scale without diluting the brand or the menu. In this conversation, you will learn more about why your opening staff should be the best trained staff that you'll ever have, why the restaurant business is just a math equation, and why a diverse portfolio of concepts can help you maximize your impact with your guests. Jumping now into my interview with Pihakis Restaurant Group founder Nick Pihakis. Also, don't forget to stick around after the interview as I will share my 6 takeaways from this discussion, actionable insights that you can take with you on the go. Okay, I'm here with Nick Pihakis of Pihakis Restaurant Group. Nick, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Yeah, so Nick, tell me about Pihakis Restaurant Group. Tell me about this group, how it came to be, how you got into the restaurant industry, and it led to where you are today.
Sure. So I've wanted to be in the restaurant business since I was 15 years old. I got my first real job at 19 as a bartender for a family-owned restaurant in Birmingham, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked in the door, and the gentleman that was supposed to train me took off his vest and said, "Try this on." I tried it on. He said, "See you later."
Oh, wow.
19 years old, I'm standing behind the bar, had no idea what I was doing. And my first guests were an older couple, and they sat down at the bar. And of course, I was nervous as hell. And he goes, I'll take an old fashioned. And I was like, shit. So I had a Mr. Boston bartender book there. And I was like, if I have to look at this book, then I'm going to look like I don't know what I'm doing. So I just I looked at the guy and I said, there's so many ways you can make an old fashioned. How do you like yours?
Clever.
And he said, "You don't know how to make an old fashioned, do you?" And I was like, "No, I don't." So he took off his jacket, got behind the bar, rolled his sleeves up, and he taught me how to make an old fashioned. And
wow,
the owner of the restaurant came out. He was like, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm training your bartender." So that was my first experience in the restaurant business, which I did. I bartended for 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was a retired insurance executive. And he said, "You're doing this work for somebody else. Why don't we open up our own restaurant?" He'd never been in the restaurant business. And so we bought a Pasquale's Pizza. And a month after we owned it, we got a cease and desist letter from the corporate office saying you can't transfer a franchise.
Oh.
So we were like, okay, now what are we going to do? So a good friend of his had a barbecue restaurant that they had actually worked together in the insurance business. He said, just send Nick up here. I'll show him a couple things. And an older gentleman that would work for him, he was retired and he was just helping him on the side. He said, I'll go with Nick and teach him how to cook barbecue. And that's how I learned how to cook barbecue from a very nice gentleman that's 72 years old. We opened in 1985. We ran Jim and Nick's for, good gosh, 30 plus years. We got it to 40 restaurants. We sold it, which, still today, I'm still a partner in it, not an active partner, but an investment partner. And then we started a company called Fresh Hospitality. We started training some young entrepreneurs that were trying to figure out how to grow their business, didn't know how. I did that with one of my original partners in Jim and Nick's. We did that for a few years, and then I spun off on my own, started Pappas Restaurant Group. All of our restaurants, we really create. So when I was doing back at Jim and Nick's, we did an event in Charleston, South Carolina called Pitmaster event with Southern Foodways Alliance. And it was part of the Charleston Wine and Food. And we featured Pitmaster every year for the dinner. And my first Pitmaster was Rodney Scott.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took me forever to get him to commit. I finally had to go up to Hemingway and say, you've got to come down here and do this. And he did. And we became fast friends. We opened up a Rodney Scott's barbecue in Charleston, South Carolina. So Rodney and I created that restaurant. He knew the whole hog business. I knew the barbecue business. We put the two together, and that really kicked off Pappas Restaurant Group. And then I had another concept that I started to call Little Donkey Taqueria. Mm-hmm. It's and we started growing it. That was our second one. And then, one thing led to another. And what we realized was we could create restaurants without having to go and find people that were already doing it. And I enjoyed that so much more. So we've created a Greek restaurant called Tasty Town Greek Restaurant and Lounge. We just opened up Luca Legato, which is named after my dog. And we just opened it a month ago. So we really enjoy the fact of creating restaurants as well as partnering up with people like Rodney. Mm-hmm. And that led us into the partnership with Sean Brock. The big tie-in for all of that is an organization called the Southern Foodways Alliance, mm-hmm. which that's how we all met. It's a great organization. And we, it's one that they did different events throughout the years that we were involved with them. They did a symposium every year. They did field trips, and they did a field trip 18 years ago in Nashville called the Tomato Festival. And that was my first introduction to Sean Brock. Mm-hmm. I went up and they had stations set up, and Sean made a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich. And I'll never forget it. I mean, the bread was perfect. It had the perfect thickness of the bread. The bacon was cooked perfect. The tomatoes were sliced exactly the way they should be sliced. Everything about the sandwich, when you bit into it, it was magical. And and that in itself is who Sean Brock is. Mm-hmm. Is he knows how to put flavors together, and he knows how to create. He's a scientist, in my opinion, a genius. So it doesn't matter if he's doing a fine dining Audrey's or June's or any of the other restaurants he did. When he decided to do Joyland, he didn't approach it any different way than he approached the fine dining. Yeah. And so the thing that he does best and the thing that I do best seem to merge as a great partnership, which I know how to grow businesses, and he knows food better than anybody I know. So that's how we sort of got into the Joyland partnership.
Yeah, tell me about where the seed of an idea started for Joyland, because I mean, I remember, about a decade ago, there was real momentum for chefs of Sean Brock's caliber to get into fast casual, because I think a lot of people looked at Chipotle and they thought, oh, chef oriented fast casual makes sense. But not some of the chefs who tried it didn't make total sense, because of, I think what you're saying is a lot of chefs are great with culinary, but they don't always know the multi-unit scaling a concept Would you clearly bring that to the table? So I'm curious, at what point did you and Sean Brock say to yourselves, or come to this, idea together of, let's start a fast casual concept that could have some legs to scale?
Well, I mean, to give credit to him, he created that concept to be able to scale. It's not complicated.
Hmm.
It's just very, very focused on ingredients. And, what we do is we put systems in place. So I always say we count rubber bands and paper clips. We look at every penny that that could possibly be of value to save efficiencies and not pass along inefficiencies to our guests. So when you're able to do that and when you scale a business, what happens, first thing that happens is dilution. So the idea that you had, that you were in that building every day and you were watching every quality, you were buying the product yourself, you were watching everything, and again, counting paper clips and rubber bands, you can do it yourself. But as you grow, that attention has to be passed along to the new person that's in the building and the staff. And the first staff when you open is the best trained staff you'll ever find, because once you do that, you never have that opportunity again. When you do have that opportunity to open up your second, third, 10th, 100th store, you got to have great systems in place to be able to transfer that information effectively.
Mhm.
And so, Sean created this fast casual, fast food, sort of leaning towards fast food, burger, chicken place, and with the best ingredients you could possibly get, the procedures that he wants to be able to cook that food and deliver it to the highest degree that he can deliver it. You have to have good systems to be able to do that, or you can't afford to grow, because you can't afford the food, you can't afford the raw ingredients to begin with. So by
Yeah.
putting great systems in place and by developing the people around you, you can always pay more. You can buy better quality products. You can build better facilities. So systems are the key to the whole thing. So
Sure.
merging his focus on great ingredients, great procedures, our focus on systems and training and how to create good financial statements to be able to look at a location and say, this location here, we're going to do an ROI. We can see we can make money doing it, and doing all the work up front. You know that you will be able to be successful without doing the death sentence, which is raise prices,
Yeah.
cut portion size, don't pay your employees, buy cheaper furniture, buy cheaper ingredients, all those things. And that's inevitably what happens in growth of any business,
Yeah.
unless you have a way to control that, which is what we bring to the table.
Tell me how then, what is the secret sauce here? Tell me how you were able to make this math work, that you can do all those things that you want to do with the great ingredients, paying your staff fairly, keeping the prices, relatively low in a fast casual setting. Was there a certain formula you struck on that you were able to do all of those things to your standards?
Yeah, what I realized as I grew, my first company, Jim and Nick's, I was everything from the grill cook to the busboy to, every position you could possibly find. And as we grew and were able to afford to bring people in, I surrounded myself with some really, really smart people,
Hmm.
and much smarter than me in the areas of their expertise. So when I did Pihakis Restaurant Group, a lot of the people that were with me at Jim and Nick's, a lot of the people that I knew in the industry that had a lot of years of experience, I brought them in and I front loaded our company. So we've got a phenomenal culinary department. Paul Yeck, he leads up all of our culinary, uh, formerly trained in New York. worked for Jose Andres for years. Just has a incredible background. So he relates to Sean very well. Angie Mosier, she's just a creative director that you couldn't ever imagine how talented she is. And Josh Gentry, which is our COO, he's been with me for 20 years. Mm-hmm. So I can go on, but I just built this staff to be able to, from IT to administration to creative director to culinary. I built that staff so we could tackle each one of these areas and be able to put it together, because in the restaurant business is really just a math equation. You have X number of seats, you got X check average. You know how many times you've got to turn the restaurant over to be able to meet the volume that you need to make money. Mm-hmm. And if you have the right people in the right place and you have the right systems and you understand, that's the first thing you got to do. You don't just throw a dart at it. You have to put it down on paper, and it's got to work on paper first.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Walk me through Joyland. Walk me through the menu of this concept. How you feel this concept really differentiates from what's going on in fast casual generally today.
Well, he's got this burger. It's called I think it's Smash Burger. It's the crust burger is what it's actually called, but it's the craziest thing. And it's, when you eat it, it's just one of those things where you crave it. That's really important in the whole scheme of things. Is if you can create the crave, then you win. And he's got just enough items on the menu. One of them's the joystick. It's a chicken on a stick that the idea came from a gas station in Oxford, Mississippi. But so the menu is very simple. It's executable. Everything's cooked to order. So there's nothing where, you go in and it's sitting on the shelf waiting on you to order. So it's very high quality food, 5 items on the menu. There are items that people love. Milkshakes. I mean, who doesn't love a milkshake? So
sure.
I think that it's simple, but it's complicated in the sense that the way that Sean put the menu together, the ingredients are all high-end, high-quality ingredients, local. He supports a lot of the local farmers. So, again, how do you do that on a scale? Mm-hmm. You've got to have somebody that's out there sourcing. You got to have somebody that understands that this is the ingredients we're going to use, and we're not going to compromise. So by keeping the menu small and focusing on the quality, and I think it's different than going from a chef putting something together and it slowly migrates or dilutes to another fast food restaurant.
Right.
And the way that this is designed, I feel like we can keep it intact.
Well, there's something to the, branding of a chef or a personality such as Sean Brock. And I want to draw a comparison to Rodney Scott, because obviously with Rodney Scott's barbecue also in your portfolio, here's somebody, Rodney Scott, who, he's really conquered the barbecue world. He's built this remarkable reputation, and can leverage something like that into, he's a travel destination. But Rodney Scott's is, when you're in Charleston, you go to Rodney Scott's, right? And whereas if you put a Rodney Scott's in every community in America, it's not that anymore. It's just, I could get this wherever. It's a commodity in essence. And Sean Brock is similar, right? When you go to Charleston or Nashville, right? Like Husk was that was a destination. That was a bucket list kind of restaurant. And I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, with Joyland, you could drop these into, Nashville, Oxford, Charleston. You could drop them into some of these really charming southern cities that have good tourism business, college town, whatever. or you could blow it out and go for the Chipotle model. Maybe that's a little lofty. But when you blow it out, maybe you lose a little bit of that, sort of special nature of it. So I guess I'm curious as to what your approach is more, what you envision the approach to be more for Joyland, and how you can, keep some of that brand affinity that you have around somebody like Sean Brock.
The thing I learned through the years is one of the most important things is consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And what you don't want to do is somebody go, oh, there's a Joyland, and they go in and they eat and they go, well, I had the Joyland, the original Joyland, and this isn't the same, right?
Right.
So, and in comparison to barbecue's very emotional.
Mm.
Like one of my escapades is I opened up a Jim and Nick's in Memphis, Tennessee. And Memphis, Tennessee is like the king of barbecue. And
right.
Everybody was like, if you lost your mind. And
it's the Holy Land, yeah.
What we realized when I did that was we really couldn't compete with, the couple of people told me, they said, you can't take that memory out of somebody's mouth. So that you grew up eating a certain barbecue, you're always going to remember that's where you went, whether you went with your family or you went with whoever. It's really hard and becomes very emotional. I think consistency, though, is what we realized is you go into a Joyland and burgers are not, they're not singled out into one area. They're not regional. They're not local. Well, burgers are burger. It's an American
right.
food. And if we can reproduce the exact quality and with the same experience that is in the original store, and we can replicate that, then people won't be disappointed. It all comes down to, do they like that product better than the one that's across the street? Right.
Yeah.
And so barbecue is just different, though, because even though we're much more transient in today's world, when I first got in the barbecue business, beef brisket didn't exist in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah.
And now if you don't have it, people are like, you're not a real barbecue place.
Mm-hmm.
So, with Rodney's, whole hog is very popular in the Carolinas. And we did bring Rodney's to Birmingham and opened up, and people didn't understand what whole hog was.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we expanded the menu and we gave people what they wanted, and along with educating them on whole hog. So
mm-hmm.
we added shoulder on the menu and then gave people an option. So when they didn't have an option, they didn't like it. But when they did have an option, it was interesting because they chose the whole hog over the shoulder because they wanted to try something different.
Yeah.
So, it's just a different animal. But the burger world, come on, it's the most competitive, and even to the point where they used to call it burger wars, where McDonald's would charge 99 cents for a burger, and then Burger King had to go to 99 cents, right? Yep. And they kept doing that. And what they were doing, as we all know, it's a math equation. There's no way that you can sell a good quality burger for 99 cents, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so what they were doing is they were really dumbing down the product. And we're just not going to do that. We're going to stay true to what we feel like the concept really represents, what Sean Brock represents. We hold him to the highest esteem. And so when you go into a city and you see Joyland and you see McDonald's or you see Shake Shack or whatever, and you come into Joyland, you go, this is better. And and it's got to be consistent. That's so important, And the other thing is I go back to the efficiencies of running a business, and what we bring to the table is if we pay our employees better because we run our business effectively, efficient, and we buy high quality food and we can price it competitively, and we size our buildings right so we're not killing ourselves on rent and all. The thing, people make places. And as long as we are the employer of choice, and you walk in and you get treated different, right?
Yeah.
You get treated with respect. You get treated with, the highest hospitality that goes along with a burger. You over deliver to the guests. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of things that come with representing Sean Brock as a chef and his name for people to come in and go, this is a clean, fun, uh, great feeling restaurant. The food quality is incredible. It's consistent, and the employees are the nicest employees, best hospitality that we could possibly receive in a burger place, and we can win.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I mean, great food will always win, right? And great hospitality. Those are always going to be high standards, or standards that consumers expect to be met. You've been doing this a long time. You see how much great food and great hospitality can win. But I'm curious because in the last 5 years, now you add this layer of DoorDash, digital ordering, convenience. I don't want to leave my couch. I want things fast. I want that, that's a whole other sort of layer to this that I find really fascinating because, you know, to some degree, I don't think we can have it both ways. To some degree, if you want that great hospitality and that great burger, you've got to go in and get it, right? Like you got to get off your couch for that. So tell me, because I'm sure you've got a strong opinion on this, having been in this industry for so long. How do you bring these two things together, where you want Sean Brock quality food at an affordable price point, but Joe Schmo over here doesn't want to get off his couch to eat it? How do you bring those two things together?
It's funny that you brought that up because we got in late last night to Nashville and we ordered from Uber Eats,
Mhm.
and we were waiting around, and finally I went back to my computer and it said, your order was canceled because the driver couldn't execute it.
Jeez.
Then we ordered from another restaurant and they said now it's 10 o'clock. They said no later than 10:05. And then we got a message that said your order's been delivered. And we went all over the place outside looking for it, and it was never delivered. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
So again, the expectation of somebody that's sitting around and wants convenience, and they don't, their expectation is not the same as somebody that goes into a restaurant.
Yeah.
And DoorDash and Uber Eats and all the other delivery services are dependent on employees that we don't employ. So we can't control them. They can control them. We can't. And they're the ones who hire them. And then you just take the chance of, does that employee really care? Or are they just after a delivery job? Right?
Right.
They're not
Yeah.
going to represent us ever. So then as an operator, you got to decide, do we want to use a delivery service?
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at the world today, and COVID really set the standard of you almost have to.
Yeah.
It's like credit cards. You go cash only, and people go, no. So now today, what I see a lot of in the credit card world is people are giving discounts if you pay cash.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that people that sit on their couch and order food are thinking they're going to get the same food that you get when you're in the building.
Mm-hmm.
Where it really affects me is I know that as the operator, and I'm basically whoring myself for the business by allowing myself to do that, because that's what a lot of the guests want. I mean, it's 30% of our business.
Mm-hmm.
And in every concept that I own, it's at least 30%.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And during COVID, it was, I mean, let's face it, it was 90%.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people just got into that situation where they depend on it. It's convenience. That's what it is. So they're trading convenience for quality. And on the flip side of that, you would think that, well, there was one delivery service, then there became a second delivery service, and then there became a third one. And you would think through that competition, they would force each other to get better.
Yeah.
And they're not.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know what the answer here is, but I got to ask it. Is there an unfair expectation on you with here, right? Like, and I've told this story a few times, but I had an experience with a full service chain, Mexican chain. I won't say who, and it was my first experience with this chain. But we did takeout, and my wife picked it up, and it was terrible. It was terrible, and I can recognize doing what I do that it was not fair of me to make my first experience with that chain be a takeout experience, because I didn't get nearly close to the standard I'm sure they have if I dined in the restaurant. But a lot of customers don't have that same kind of grace, right? Like, a lot of customers are gonna be like, this is terrible, I'm never going back. You didn't tell me that was a terrible restaurant, right? So I don't know. I mean, is it unfair to the restaurant to have that expectation that you must meet that same level of quality, by giving up a lot of this control? And is there anything you can do about it?
I think from an operator, there's certain uh, foods that carry well. And, like, I'll give you an example, Chinese food.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was very little full service. I don't even know if there was a full service Chinese restaurant until PF Chang's opened.
Right.
So, I mean, when I was growing up, if you wanted Chinese food, you went and got it and brought it home. And that's what you were used to eating. So when you did go to a PF Chang's and it was elevated, and there was great wines on the menu and cocktails and all that kind of stuff, it changed the expectation. So those became two completely separate expectations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then pizza's the same way. I mean, we are in an Italian restaurant business, and our pizzas are great. And we tested them to go as well as we tested them coming right out of the oven. There's a difference, but it's a slight difference. But then you go, well, is it better than Papa John's or Pizza Hut? And the ingredients, the dough to all the toppings and everything, we put much more emphasis on using better ingredients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you give them good instructions. You say, when you take this home, don't put it in a microwave, right? Turn your oven on, put it in the oven if you want to heat it back up, or just eat it as soon as you get it. But there's certain foods that hold up well. There's certain foods that you just, as an operator, just say, I'm not going to let that go as a to-go food because it's just going to be shitty no matter what.
Right. Yeah.
We as operators have to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, that's a great point.
If you order a great salad and they put the meat on the salad and it's grilled chicken right off the grill, and you take it home, what's it going to be? So you package it differently so the chicken stays separate. So when you get home, you got your cold salad, you unwrap the chicken, you put it on there. There's just different ways to prevent the deterioration of the product. And then there's some that there's just nothing you can do about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel for you as an operator, because it's a tall order. It's a big ask in a low profit margin business. That's, again, it's a little bit not fair. I'm curious for Pihakis Restaurant Group in general. I mean, you've got some incredible concepts, incredible names involved. As you grow this portfolio, you've talked about scale and you've talked about efficiencies. When you step back and look at this portfolio, how do you envision really leveraging these concepts in such a way to create efficiencies of scale, in such a way to, really maximize what you can accomplish with each of these concepts as part of the whole?
That's a good question. Two things. I want people to go into any of the restaurants we are involved in and look around and look at the facility, the furniture, the amount of focus we put on our facilities, our employees, how they're dressed, the quality of the food. And I want people to go, this must be a Pihakis Restaurant Group, no matter what the name of it is. That's the first thing that I really want to accomplish, because it sets a standard that if you come to work with us, you're going to be part of our family. And we're gonna hold you to the highest level of execution, but we're going to take really good care of you. And again, I go back to people make places. The second piece of that is what we've learned is the more restaurants that we put around each other. So like in our, I don't know if you're familiar with Birmingham, Alabama at all, but there's a
Absolutely.
community real close to downtown. It's called Homewood, and it's a suburb. And we have um, Rodney Scott's Little Donkey, Luca, and then we have a breakfast, donut breakfast, lunch, and milkshake concept that's only open from 7 to 5. And all those 4 restaurants, you can walk to each one of them. They're all right in a small area. We're doing another development that we bought 6.5 acres, and we're putting 4 restaurants on that 6 acres. They're each individual buildings. They're independently built, like they look like they don't look like the same restaurants, right? They have their own identity. And what happens, we feel like we've created the efficiencies that people can pull up, and you can go to each one of those restaurants instead of, I don't really want barbecue, I want this. And so we're finding that it brings more people together because they have choices. Then our technology, literally, you can sit down at one of our restaurants, and in that development that we're doing, you can sit down in one of our restaurants and order from, you sit down in one area and you can order from all 4 restaurants, and the food comes and you get one bill. You don't have to pay independently. It makes it a lot easier on the guests. So, we're figuring out ways to bring people together without having to make choices of, well, I don't really want to go there, and you get what we call the veto vote. So you can pull into our parking lot, and it's the same parking lot for Rodney's and for our Mexican restaurant. And you can say, I want barbecue, and I can go, I want Mexican. And we can sit at the same table and eat the same different foods. So we're making it easier and more convenient for people to be able to have choices without having to go to different places.
So then I imagine that means you're trying to grow all of these concepts kind of together. That as you grow Rodney Scott's, are you trying to also put a Luca? Like, are you putting them in the same communities? I guess I should say.
We are, but you brought up a good point. Some of them, like Rodney's, for example. I feel like Rodney's. We're doing one in Miami. We've got one in Atlanta. We've got one now in Nashville. We're opening up Chiefs in Nashville with Eric Church and Ben Weprin down on Broadway. I think Rodney's represents a one restaurant, iconic restaurant in a big city. We're looking at DC, for example. It becomes more of a national brand, but it's unique because there's not one on every corner.
Right.
I think Luca, the Italian restaurant's sort of the same. Our hero restaurant, I feel like we can put it out there in a lot of places. I think Joyland as well, and I think our Mexican restaurants is like that. It just goes back to, what's the perception from us? What do we want people to think of the restaurant, and then what people do think of it. So if you go into a city and you got Rodney's on every corner, then it's going to diminish the brand, in my opinion.
Right.
Where you're so used to seeing burger places on every corner, we just gotta out execute everybody else and give them a different experience. But so it just depends on the concept. I am experimenting with grouping the restaurants together. It just depends on what restaurants it is, the brand. But I think that, again, we're just trying to figure it out. I hate to hear the COVID thing, but COVID's really changed a lot of things for people, and especially in our business, because you said it a few minutes ago, the margins aren't great, and you gotta really think through the strategy of what you want to do and how you do it. And it just goes back to people, and it goes back to the math equation.
Yeah,
it's a formula, right? So we want large We want to feed the masses at some restaurants, and we want to be a special place for other brands.
Yeah.
Just depends on what it is.
Well, that's fascinating stuff. Nick Pihakis of Pihakis Restaurant Group, it was a joy to talk to you, and good luck on Joyland. Looking forward to keeping up with the growth of this and the rest of your concepts. So thanks again, Nick.
Thank you.
That was my interview with Pihakis Restaurant Group founder Nick Pihakis. So what should you learn from this interview? Here are my 6 takeaways. My first takeaway is that an obsessive commitment to efficiency is key to scaling high quality concepts. Nick said this great in the interview. He said, don't pass your inefficiencies on to your guests. And he also said he likes to count paper clips and rubber bands. Now, you probably don't have a ton of paper clips and rubber bands in your restaurant business, but point taken. What he means is that you have to be obsessive about all the little details and particularly all the costs in your restaurant if you want to be able to sustain a high quality menu. If you are inefficient with your costs, if you're paying too much on paper clips and rubber bands or being wasteful, at some point that will trickle down to the guests because you have to raise your prices or you have to dilute the quality of your menu or your experience. I really appreciated that Nick is so focused on efficiencies at scale and how every little detail plays into that. Because when you have high quality food from a chef like Sean Brock, it could become very expensive, but it doesn't have to when you scale if you manage all of your other costs appropriately. And like he said, become obsessive about that. My second takeaway is that your opening staff should be the best trained staff you'll ever have. So again, talking about scaling a high quality menu and a high quality concept, when you open even just unit number 2, you're of course giving away some of the control of that high quality experience that you have created in your restaurant. So when you do that, and then on, when you open 3, 4, and beyond, every single time your staff should be trained to the max. You should have your best possible team in place, because if you're going to give up control, you're going to need somebody else who is obsessive about those details just as you are, obsessive about those efficiencies and making sure it doesn't trickle the efficiency down to the customer via the cost. That's of course important too because of consistency. We all know that when you scale, one of the most important things is to be consistent so that your experience over here is just as good as your experience over there. To Nick's point, you have to have a highly trained team, rigorously trained ahead of the open in order to be able to replicate that quality that you expect. My third takeaway is that the restaurant business is just a math equation. Okay, that is probably oversimplifying it, but Nick used that phrase a couple of times in this interview, and it really stuck out to me because in a way, he's right. He made the point, that at a certain point, you look at a restaurant and you have X number of seats, you have an X check average, and then that means you have so many turns to make your money, right? It really is, you can be boiled down to that simple math. Now, yes, there's a lot of nuance to it. We all know it's really not that simple. But the point that he's trying to make here is that if you want to run a profitable restaurant, and if you want to commit to high quality ingredients, if you want to commit to paying your staff very well, if you want some of these great touches and high quality touches, you will have to look at that equation a lot more carefully and make sure you're doing the math appropriately. Another line that Nick said that I just want to say here because it is so important not to miss this. He says, don't just throw a dart at it. It has to work on paper first. You need to write that down somewhere because I really love that. This math equation that you're doing for your own restaurant, figure it out on paper. Don't just guess. Don't just figure, oh, these costs are fine. We'll be fine. Write it down on paper. Run all the numbers as much as you can. Of course, you have a P&L you have to pay attention to. But even before you open, if you have that chance now, do this math on paper and try to figure this out because you will thank yourself in the future when you're trying to commit to the quality expectation that you have for your restaurant. My fourth takeaway is simple but so important. People make places. Again, another direct quote from Nick. He's full of this. It's great. He has so many great one-liners. People make places. Very simple, but again, so true. And what he means by that is the hospitality component in a high quality restaurant concept, such as they expect with Joyland and the other PRG concepts, is that your people in the restaurant are going to make the place a warm and wonderful experience. Yes, the food has to be spot on. Yes, you have to source high quality ingredients. But if you don't have a high quality team, then you're going to lose on, making the place that you want to really make and serve to your customers. He first used this phrase in addressing the question I had around, somebody like a Sean Brock, a Rodney Scott. These people are like tourist destinations. People seek them out and go to their restaurants. They're on covers of magazines. They are, again, destinations in their own right. And how do you protect that notion as you expand and as you scale? And that was the point that Nick made, is the people make the place. So as you scale, if you want to make the second, third, fourth, fifth locations as special as your first off, of course, make sure you've got the same high level sourcing of your ingredients and high level of food. But the next most important part that he mentioned is the people that you staff in that restaurant, so they can create that great experience. So if you go experience Rodney Scott in Charleston, and then you go experience Rodney Scott's in Birmingham, you're going to have the same great experience, the same great hospitality, and same great food. But people make places. That is so key. Again, I think you should write that one down. My fifth takeaway is that operators must decide whether off-premises business is worth lowering quality standards. This is, of course, been a topic of conversation for many years now, but I can't help but find that every conversation I have with a restaurant leader today does come back to the fact that off-premises business is this many-headed monster. It is a sizable chunk of sales. It's not going away, and perhaps it is lowering some standards from customers who are prioritizing convenience. What does that mean for a chef like Sean Brock or a restaurateur like Nick Pihakis? How do they look at this when they have such high expectations for quality? Nick, not surprising, had really thoughtful words here. And at the end of the day, what he said is, the operator has to decide whether it's something you can accept. As he pointed out, you can approach your food a little bit differently. So the food that goes out your door, you can try to disassemble it. You can try to package it so that the quality doesn't suffer en route to somebody's house. You can include instructions to the guest on how to best reassemble the food, for example. But at the end of the day, if it will never meet your standard by serving it off premises, perhaps you should consider not serving it off premises. This could get a little wacky, but I'm sure there are some restaurants that are trying this. Is all of your menu right to be served for takeout or for delivery? Maybe some of your items you hold back because you just know it won't meet that standard. Maybe some of your other items will meet that standard, or maybe none of your food should be available for off-premises. That's kind of a real risky decision to make. But at the end of the day, if you have a high standard for your quality, you have to consider these things. And maybe you should be open and communicate these things to your guests, that you're having these conversations internally, because they should understand too, if you have a crummy experience with a restaurant via takeout, I mentioned that in this interview, that this happened to me, you could have lost your shot for a long-term relationship with that guest. Is that worth it? Is it really worth it just so you can get that sale? You have to have that conversation with yourself. My sixth and final takeaway is that a diverse portfolio of concepts can help you maximize your impact with guests. I've had a blast over the last couple of years chatting with more leaders of restaurant portfolios, restaurant groups like Nick Pihakis. And I find these groups really fascinating, particularly today, because of the opportunities for efficiency, the opportunities, to really scale, but keep things very creative at the concept level. Technology today, the way you're able to leverage technology across a portfolio, it's very clear that Pihakis Restaurant Group is doing all of these things. But the story that I really stuck with me after this interview was the story Nick told about the 6 acres that Pihakis Restaurant Group had acquired, and they're going to build all of their concepts on the 6 acres. I believe it was in Birmingham, and they'll each be their own individual building, and there will be one parking lot for all of it, and there will be one seating area. And if somebody comes in with their family family and everybody wants something different. There's going to be one ordering experience, the ability for everybody to stick together, no veto vote. This isn't new necessarily, right? This is true for many restaurant groups, many small scale restaurant groups or big. But the point is that if you think about the diversity of the concepts and you think about your ability to really make a splash in a neighborhood, in a community with more than one restaurant concept and give your customers that really exciting experience of ordering from multiple places, but making it easy, making it efficient, there's something there to be said for that, not only from a business case, that's good business and, again, an efficient way to run your business, but it's also going to maximize that impact with the guest who's going to know your group, not just your individual concepts. They're going to know your group for the high quality standard that you set because of their experience with multiple concepts all at once. Those are all my takeaways for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe to Takeaway wherever you listen to podcasts and leave your feedback. You can also email me at sam.oches@informa.com. Thanks again and talk to you next week.